In this video, we're talking to you about how to structure a podcast interview. What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Claudio, owner of WinRate Consulting and host of the Big Stud Podcast. This episode is specifically about some experiences and lessons learned through podcasting. I've put out, at least 350 of my own episodes, plus I've probably done 200 to 300 where I was the guest and being interviewed. And I've learned a lot of lessons over the years of different things that you can do to make sure that you're delivering a quality interview every single time. I'm going to say this, I am not a fan of preparing questions ahead of time. I research the person, I look them up, I figure out who they are, I figure out what they're passionate about, I figure out what they're looking for right now, but I'm not a fan of predefined questions, because what happens when you do that is you ask a question, you get a really good answer that you could deep dive even further into to bring more value, but instead you just jump to another unrelated question, and it really creates this choppy, non-conversationalist type interview. Maybe that's what you want. If that's what you're looking for, is just quick hit, unrelated questions, and that's what you're hoping to get from your audience or for your audience, that's fine. But that's just not how I think you should do it. What you should do is understand what that person's passionate about right now. I think so many people jump into tell us about how you got here. Tell us about, how did people ask me all the time, Mike, how did you start your nonprofit? I've answered that question, it's got to be 300 times. And that is great, and I understand that your audience maybe hasn't heard it, but that person that you're bringing on, specifically a high-profile person who's done a lot of interviews, they don't want to answer the same questions all the time. What you want to do is get as much energy and excitement out of them as possible. So pre-interview, when I get on the call with them, I ask them, hey man, what are you passionate about right now? What are you excited about right now? What's the biggest thing you're looking forward to right now? Because when you get somebody talking about something they're excited about, they're going to give you more. They're going to give you more emotion. They're going to give you more energy. They're going to give you more excitement. They're going to give you more information because it's something that's so top of mind for them right now. So typically I kick off the interview with just a brief overview of either how I met this person, how I was introduced to this person, a brief just who they are. I've been shying away from saying hey, tell us how you got to where you are. That is a terrible way to start an interview. There's not enough context to give that person the ability to really punch the audience with some value. So I typically start off with hey, tell us about something you're really excited about right now. Tell me about something that's going on in your life right now. Tell me about this experience I heard about, or tell me about this experience I know about, or tell me about this thing that's current or future. The past is awesome, and there's a lot of value to past stories, and typically the conversation will get to those stories as you unlock and kind of tap into some more information about that person, but you want to start the interview off as fast and with as much energy as possible to grasp the attention of your audience as well as grasp the interest of the interviewee. So ahead of time, you can do some research, but I would prefer not to. Let them tell you, and then just get really good at listening. This is where I think a lot of interviewers struggle. They don't listen to the answer to pinpoint the important pieces of it, just to ask secondary questions or peel back another layer of the onion. They just want to jump on to the next thing or change topics completely. And it creates this very, I'm gonna say, out of order or non-flowing interview, and that's just not as enjoyable to listen to. So when you're going through and you get that first story going, listen to their response to see points that you believe that you could go deeper on or understand fuller to get more information about that story or more background about that lesson or more information about that story so that people can fall in love with the story as you're unpacking and unfolding it. So as you're going through, it's not a problem, in my opinion, to kind of interrupt somebody. Sometimes if you just ask them an open-ended question, they might talk too long. And that's okay in some sense, depending on who they are. But for the most part, I want you to understand that the conversation needs to flow linearly. You need to move them through the story, move them through the points, move them on to the next thing. So by listening as they're going, you can say, hey, real quick, before you move on, hey, you just said this. What do you mean by that? Or how did you learn that? Or why is that so important to you? That really starts to get people thinking and giving you real answers, real emotion, real thought-provoking advice, because it's so unprepared. It's not as, documented, scripted answer, but don't be afraid to interrupt them and ask for more detail, because they don't know a lot of the times what part of their story is the most intriguing to you or your audience. You should know your audience better than the guest does typically. And so knowing what parts of their story matter the most to your audience and pinpointing those and being able to dig deeper into it will allow you to uncover more, but also flow the interview forward where it's not just a run-on sentence or just rambling. The second part of, honestly, the second part, I've said a lot so far, but another part of importance is understanding the timeline of your episode. I want to hit 45 to 50-ish minutes every time. Like, that's my target. So if they're giving quick answers, you might become too short. Try to ask more open-ended questions, ask more intentional questions, ask more. But if they're going a little bit long, understanding like what you want to get done in that timeline. So just be cognizant of the time. I see so many people like lose track of time, and there's like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much. Tune in next week. And it's just not as tactical, as it could be. It's not as intentional as it could be. So paying attention to the time and realizing like how many good points do you want to get done in that interview, and then allow the guest to kind of lead it, but keep it in the lane, right? Coax it back into, whatever that structure is you're looking for. But then at the end, where I find that I think most people fail is they don't have a good way to put a bookend on it. They don't have a good way to end the episode or end the interview. And so questions like, hey, tell me about something you're most excited about. Tell me about what you're most looking forward to. Tell me about, something that didn't get covered, obviously, in that episode. Don't ask the same question again. Like, I think you're intuitive enough to get that. But ask them something for a final point. Hey, is there any final advice you'd like to give? That kind of pinpoints more of a punchy end to an interview. Like I did that yesterday, and he just gave a really great, 90-second lesson at the end of the episode. Obviously, it's important to ask your guests how people can find them, how people can find them in the interview, so that the audience can go find them. For me, it's MikeClaudio.com is where I send everybody. So if you're a guest or you're a high-profile person, have a website that you can send people to that is kind of that landing page of everything, but that's probably a different episode. But as you're ending the episode, final points, final lessons, where can they find you? And then I always like to add in some form of like, hey, I'm excited to see where this story is in a couple years. That kind of opens up the repeat guest. It opens up the continuation of a story. It opens up even them feeling like you're excited for them. It's a really big thing that people know that you appreciate the time they spent to be on your podcast. Because, I would say, at least for me, I've never paid somebody to be on my podcast. So they are volunteering their time to bring you and your guest, value. So making sure that they feel appreciated, making sure that they feel like you value what they brought to the table today, and then ending the episode with some sort of call to action. Invite your guest to engage with that person, invite your guest to share that, ask your guest to comment with, what was their biggest lesson taken from that. Those are all really good, really good ways to end a podcast interview. Sorry for the coughing. I've been sick the last couple of days, but you're gonna have to deal with it. But a really great call to action, subscribe, comment, review, share. Typically you can even turn that into a post and you say, comment on the post on Instagram or Facebook, wherever you're posting it. What was your favorite takeaway? But there's not really a step-by-step process to interviewing. You have to be intuitive. You have to listen. You have to listen with the intent to understand, not to respond. And you have to guide the conversation in a way that gets the most valuable points, uncovered for your audience, so that it's not just another generic interview of that person that likely they've heard 100 other times. So be intentional, do a little bit of research, understand where the value can be taken, and then guide the conversation as effectively as possible. That's my approach. There's probably people out there that have the strict step-by-step process. That's just not how I do it. I want to create an open environment, a welcoming environment for people to have a conversation and really open up about their story. So listen with the intent to understand as you hear things. Ask some more qualifying, deeper questions, and then make sure you appreciate them. Ask them where they can be found, and invite your audience to take action on that. If you want to listen to more of my podcast, The Big Stud Podcast is where you can find me on all major platforms. If you go to MikeClaudio.com, everything's listed there as well. But I love your feedback on this. Comment below, engage, subscribe. See, it's not difficult. You just wrap it into the episode. But I want to hear, what are you looking for? What are specific questions you have about this, so I can maybe answer more specifically, because this is specifically around interview type podcasts, where there's monologue, there's co-host styles, there's vlog style, there's a ton of different structures you can have, but this is specifically for interviewing people. But if you have questions about your podcast or things that you want to try to get better, comment below. Let's engage and see how I might be able to bring you value so that you can win fast and win often.